If you're a business owner and most of your time is going towards managing your team, you'll love this interview today and the insights that business coach Jayne Ramlakan shares. She talks about how your role as the business owner is not to manage the team. Your role is to manage the systems manage the team manage the customers take care of the business. We also talk about the difference between management and leadership. Let's take a listen. Jayne, tell me, why did you become a business coach?
Hi, Michelle. I think one of the reasons why is I wanted to do something more purposeful. I wanted to find a role that I could give back. And being in corporate for so long, I realized that I could help one business owner, but I think by becoming a business coach, I could help many business owners. So that was my why.
And what were you doing before you joined Action Coach as a business coach?
So I actually trained as an accountant back in South Africa, but I always loved business. And so I went back and joined the corporate, and I worked through different careers, being in operations, finance, and eventually the last 11 years, I was the CEO for a food manufacturer.
Amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And so you get to speak with business owners every day. What do you find is the common challenge with those businesses?
I think a lot of the business owners that I speak to, they're using multiple hats. So, they're starting small. They don't have the direction often as to when they should employ more people, build systems or processes. So they're using many hats. They find there's not enough hours in the day, and they're just trying to make the best of their environment. Yeah.
And so, what do you start working with them on? If a business says, okay, Jayne, I'd love some help, where do you help them?
I really need to understand their goals, like their why. Why did they go into business? Is it because they wanted to be self-employed? Do you have an aspirations to grow wealth? Once we understand their why, then I can kind of know what I need to do and how I need to do it. But obviously it's through the conversations, through collaborations, and that's how we try to help them. Yeah.
And why knowing their why is that important?
For me, it's more about understanding the direction, because if you understand their why, you understand why they're in the business, what drives them, because that becomes their purpose. And it's something beyond being a business owner. Your why is what sets the roadmap for your future.
Something greater.
Yes.
Being part of something greater. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. And so what type of businesses do you generally work with?
I work with more medium-sized businesses, some small as well, depends, where they are in the growth cycle. But generally, clients of mine have the aspiration to grow. They want to have a business that can work with or without them. And those are my dream clients.
Okay. So business that can work without them, I mean, what does that mean?
What that means is that, often when we go into business, we kind of transition most often from being an employee of a company to being a business owner. And sometimes it's very difficult to use that business owner cap. So being a business owner means that you develop teams, systems, processes, so that you can choose to have a 6 weeks holiday in Europe and your business still works without you.
So having a team that can run the business without you, I mean, that's easier said than done. So, what are some of the challenges business owners have with teams and letting go of their business?
It's a very good question, Michelle, because often that's the biggest challenge, isn't it? Is trying to let go and also trying to build a business that can work with or without you. But it's about investing in the business. And, in Action Coach, we have this wonderful model that says, the business owner's role is to set the systems and processes that manages the team. The team takes care of the customers and the customers take care of the business. So often it's the matter of trying to invest in what the systems and processes and giving the business some structure. So it means that you are not people managing. And that's where I think a lot of time goes for business owners.
So instead of, that's an interesting concept. So instead of people managing, you're managing as the business owner, the systems, and the systems manages the team. Walk me through that.
So what it means, like, instead of being, so when we talk about, like, if you have a system and process and you develop that, and if you have, for example, an SOP or standard operating procedures, no matter who is taking over the role, that person will follow the systems and processes. So, for example, if you've got McDonald's, McDonald's is run by 16 years old. And you ask the question, how can McDonald's operations be dependent on 16-year-olds? Because they have this amazing systems and processes. So where in the world you go, you have the same experience. So I think when businesses start to adapt that mindset, then it kind of frees them from managing the people, because the people are being managed by systems and processes. And it's very consistent as well.
So can you give me an example of that with a client you've worked with?
Absolutely. So I have a client that's basically was very much in the business. Her staff was always going to her seeking advice. Her day was very distractive as well, because she was always answering questions. And one of the things we spoke about is try to set in scripts to start off with, building templates so they have a checklist. And she found that as the days went by, they were coming to her less, and it freed her more, it gave her more time to actually start working on her business.
And so what type of processes did she put in place?
So she's in the beauty industry. So they have like a checklist. So for example, if someone is going, say, for example, a facial, the first thing is you give like 5 minutes, was build rapport. Then you get the consent. So she put a very detailed step, and she actually gave time allocations as well. So they were not going over the treatment time. And then the end of it, we always had, what's the closing. And the closing was as well as, to, like, for example, it could be another product they sold, or another treatment they sold. So it was a whole sales process, similar to what we have in Action Coach.
Okay, so what she was doing was, so if she onboarded a new team member, she was training them in that system, relying on the process that she had built.
Absolutely.
And so the training often, I mean, it's one thing you hear business owners, I've got SOPs, but how do you actually implement them into a business? Can you share some insights on that?
Absolutely. So it's, generally I would say if as a business owner, if you're implementing a system and process, you got to collaborate with your team, because they are the one that's actually sitting on the seat and doing the work. So I think when you get buy-in as well, so they feel they're part of the process. So when they feel they're part of the process, they take ownership for it as well. But also is when you find that someone is not, training is a big part of it as well. How do we train them? How do we onboard them? But also you find that, you got to have key actionable items and key performance indicators attached to it as well.
And so what's then the role of the business owner, your client, what was the different type then of leadership that flipped for her? Instead of managing the team, she stepped more into a leadership role. Walk me through that.
Absolutely. So she was really, she empowered a team. Obviously, they felt very empowered. She invested in their 12 weeks sales training masterclass as well. So obviously, you could see the benefit in that. And for her as well, she got, she was working 7 days a week. So she'd gone down to 5 days a week. And also she felt like she was looking more at the big picture. And as her coach as well, we are working more on strategy. We're looking at more about bringing new product lines, new treatments. So she kind of, instead of working in the business, she started to grow her business. So that's what changed for her.
So, yeah, I mean, this interesting, isn't it? This kind of the topic of management versus leadership, being a manager in the business, managing the day-to-day versus a leadership role when you start to let go of some of the things in your business and you rely more on the team to run the day-to-day. What is the difference really when you think about management versus leadership?
That's a really interesting question, because it's always, sometimes it kind of weaves in between. There's a very minute difference between a manager and a leader. I'll give you an example what I think. I think a manager is more manages the systems and processes. I think a leader empowers people to deliver on the systems and processes. So I know in my role as a CEO, it had to do a lot of leadership, but we do need managers as well, because managers needs to make sure everything is running smoothly. But I think as a business owner, it's more a leadership role rather than a manager role.
And so as a leader, what are some of the things that you're doing to empower your team, create better culture?
Absolutely. So it's more about giving my team the flexibility as well. So kind of we have, for example, like a manual. For example, with the sales team, they have a sales process. They have the touch points they have to do. So it's more about trying to give them the freedom, and it's managing the outcome. So I don't necessarily have to manage the activity, I manage the outcome. So as long as my team has the flexibility and they know it's very much a outcome driven culture that we have, so they have flexibility on how they manage their time and how they manage their clients as well. So it's more about empowering them to make decisions rather than making the decisions for them.
Wow, that's interesting. That's a big kind of BFO for me. So instead of managing that activity, you're managing that outcome. And then what's the benefit that comes from that?
So the benefit comes from that is like for me as a business owner, I'm not focusing on what they are doing. I mean, they all have the time allocated, they have their KPIs. So it gives me time to, for example, work on the business, like be it, what's the new marketing strategy? What's the new sales? Is it a new product we're going to bring into the business? Arranging workshops, networking with stakeholders. So it frees my time, and I know that the team are still managing the activities that's going to get me the results to grow our business.
Great. And so how, when you're starting to, coach a business, it's looking at bringing on team and coaching them to put systems in place so that them as the owner can take a step back and let go a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
What is the right team structure for the business to have in place to help them do that?
I always say that you hire on attitude rather than skills, because skills can always be taught. And I think it's more important is I always kind of encourage my clients is get them to understand their vision, because when you understand the vision and you understand the purpose, they're very much aligned to it. So I always, I'm a firm believer that people don't buy what you sell, they buy what you do. So if you're a team member, if you've got a team member and you're hiring someone and they believe in what you do, it's very easy for them to adapt to the values, the cultures, the process of the business. So, and also we do, one of the things we also do is we hire a lot for the future of the business rather than for today. So you're looking at long term. So what would the company need another 6 months? And then we hire future as well.
That's a really interesting point, because we do tend to hire based on the current needs of where we're at, without thinking into the future. And is 6 months even far enough ahead? Because even in that time, it's like, I guess this is why knowing why you're doing what you're doing and the final destination for being in business is so important, because you want to know you got a future plan, right? Plan for the future.
Absolutely.
And so what are some of the ways that you can start to look forward to then determine who and how to hire?
So what we do also, Michelle, is when we do the planning process, one of the things I also do, for example, if I've got a client that's has the aspiration to grow the business, and one of the things we do, like is say in 2 years' time, 5 years' time, is actually look at the organizational structure of what is needed. And so, for example, we start the org structure, obviously the business owner or CEO, and it works down. And then one of the things we do is we start the hiring process by looking at the owner's work and look at, okay, what can we delegate? What can we automate? And what can we train? And we take the hours, and as he's progressing and we realize, we actually need someone to do marketing, and it's 30 hours a week. Then we look and we go to market and we hire for that. So that frees the business owner. So it's very much a very systematic, structured way of hiring in a company, but it's also looking at the future growth as well.
Great. And so you've worked with so many businesses and your experience as well as a leader. managing people can be like one of the biggest challenges in a company. So, you've mentioned, this, you relying on the systems, but we're managing people. So there's obviously things that come up from time to time, someone's not well or having issues or challenges that on a personal level that come up. And how do you recommend business owners can kind of factor that in and handle that appropriately?
Absolutely.
As a leader?
I think you always have to have empathy as a leader, but it's also the conversations that we have. So you're promoting the culture of ownership, accountability, and responsibility. So, for example, one of the things I do is, life happens, and often we go in, there's an excuse for something that happened, or, sometimes it's in denial as well. But it's more about having the conversation with them that encourages the positive rather than the negative. Because it's like, I always ask, the way you lead the question will get the response. And there's a whole saying, the way we communicate is the response we get. So, for example, if I feel like if someone didn't meet the deadlines or whatever, and instead of saying why you didn't do it, is acknowledge it hasn't been done, but how can we make this happen by close of business today? So very direct, very, so it's more about having the conversation and the communication that can get the desired results. And I completely, sometimes there'll be, cases where you will not get the results, but then you've got to manage that as well. And at the end of the day, I always believe we can't work around our teams. The teams work for the business, and it has to work with what makes the business work.
Yeah, that's easier said than done, though, I can imagine.
Absolutely.
So, it's that I think one of the other challenges, correct me if I'm wrong, is keeping track of the team, holding them accountable. So it's one thing to, follow the system, but what if they're not following the system?
Then you have to have the conversation. Then the first thing you got to think about is, check your recruitment policy. Was the hiring policy, did we comply with our hiring policy? And sometimes it goes to that. Then you got to reset that. And it's sometimes as a business owner, Michelle, you got to make some tough decisions as well, and what works for the company. And I always say, we'll have the conversation. We can always course correct, put, remedial processes in place, or get the support. But at the end of the day, if it's not working, it's not working. But we'll always try to make it work. But then there's a time when you got to question whether this is the right fit for the organization going forward. And sometimes you notice when you're bringing about change, or there's a change in the systems or processes, unfortunately, some team members don't want to come on board because no one enjoys change. And then that's from, leadership to make a decision as well.
Yeah, sometimes you know in your gut that it's time that's not working out with a team member. And so the longer you wait, the harder it is to address. And there's that saying of, slow to hire, fast to fire. I'm sure that a lot of business owners listening would resonate with that. They've got that feeling some, a team member's not getting the results they should be, or doing the activity or following the system that they should be following. And you make excuses for them all the time.
Absolutely. Yeah. And
how's the best way to kind of handle that when you know that you've got that feeling coming up?
Michelle, I think a lot of time it's to do with the fear. Because they are, it's the fear of bringing someone in. It's the fear of not having that person there. Even if the person is at 50%, at least 50% is getting done. And often business owners tell me that. They say, well, the person, I had a case where this person wasn't performing his role, but he rocked up every day. And the business owner said, I can't get rid of him because this person shows up every day, regardless of the performance. So so one of the conversations you have is saying, you will never know unless you go to market. You'll never know unless you go through the recruitment process, because new talent comes into the organization. They're also bringing new skills as well. So we could maximize that as well. And I always say you always hire with a higher talent rather than a low talent as well, and the smarter people as well. So sometimes I think fear plays a big part of it. And also, if someone has been in the company for a long time, it makes it a very difficult decision to make, right? Because they've kind of built the business or whatever reasons. But sometimes it's difficult. But I always say, even for me personally, I take the emotion out of it. It has to be a logical decision.
Mm. How do you take the emotion out of it?
It's really looking at what the business needs, and doing it, like, for example, and, basically rating it. This is what the role requires. This is how the person is performing. Is it sustainable, or am I doing a whole lot of damage for the whole business as a whole? So, I always have this saying, you can sacrifice one employee for the rest of the business, or you sacrifice the entire business for one employee. We have to make that choice.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, that's a great question to sit with, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Mm. And how long is too long to wait when you know it's not a good fit?
Michelle, it's a tough one, but I think I can go back to my role as a CEO because it's a bigger company than what I'm running at the moment. It's always, you try and go through the process, and everything has a process. You got to be fair, you got to be reasonable, and you got to always have empathy, right? But then if you're going through the process and there's no improvement, then you have to make the call. But if you're given all the support, you're giving the training, and there is an improvement month on month, then I will work with that person.
Mm.
But if there's zero improvement, then I will make a call then.
And how often is it good to check in terms of performance reviews with team members?
It's so funny. Back in the days, we always used to do annual, and I stopped doing that many, many, many years ago. So for me, it's more, weekly check-in to see how you're going, how you're tracking. Because if I can course correct or help or support, I can do it in a week. Because when you do it on monthly or bi-monthly, it's too far gone. And as a business, it's activities that we do every day that matters, that gets us to the goal. So it's something that I measure quite often weekly. And, there's information so easily available now because of our CRMs and stuff like that. So you can just jump in and see how we're tracking.
And it can be 10 minutes. It doesn't need to be an hour meeting every week, does it?
Exactly.
Yeah, I remember in one of my earlier corporate roles, I had a CEO, and I would meet with him once a week, like you suggested, and it was literally just 10 minutes, and we'd sit down, and he'd only ever ask two questions. One is, how are you? So talk about empathy as a leader. How are you? And because he knew I had a big workload, how are you? And the second one was, is there anything I can do to help?
Exactly right.
And just those two questions just made him such an amazing leader for me. I would have done anything for him to help move that business forward. And yes, obviously there's, reporting and tracking and things like that in terms of the accountability. But that empathy and understanding that you mentioned as a leader, like it's that balance, isn't it, between tracking, accountability, and also having that care and empathy to help create that culture. Let's talk about culture for a minute. Some of the things that help you, change culture in an organization?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think, I always believe as human beings, we're good people, and sometimes it's the environment that actually affects that behavior as well, or the outcome. So I always spend a lot of time working on the environment. The environment could be, for example, the mentoring. How am I mentoring him? How the leaders are mentoring him? Sometimes when you've got a team member and if they feel like they're not part of the team, that could affect the performance. So there's all these other factors that you got to take into consideration when there's an underperforming team. It's just not the work. So I always go back and I track it and I observe, like, for example, how are they functioning, the team? How are they supported by their co-workers? Because at the end of the day, that all affects the outcome. So that's one of the things we promote is culture. And one of the things we do as well is like having that open communication. We do fun things as well at work. We go out like 2 nights ago, we went bowling, which was really fun, so it was, we're a small team, but it was good to do that. So it's about bringing fun into the role as well. But also, as leaders as well, it's not just an employee, it's a human being, it's a person, it's a mom, it's a wife, it's a brother, a sister, it's a relationship as well. So they're just not employees. So sometimes you've got to treat them as a whole package. And even asking the question like, how was your day? How was your evening? It gives you an idea of what they've been through, because sometimes, someone rocks up late and they just most probably had this, had another life before they came to work, right? That we're just judging them at that moment, but also understanding their backstory is important as well.
You mentioned like family. Sometimes you have a different relationship apart from the hat that you're wearing when you're in the office, or in business. That, how do you navigate that kind of relationship? If it's a personal relationship, sometimes you can find you take liberties that you wouldn't otherwise take with people that maybe you don't know as well. What are some of the ways to navigate that best?
I think we go back to the empathy, right? Understanding, like, for example, if you got a parent that had a sick child, you got to make allowances as well. But I think sometimes when you make allowances, when you have empathy, when you're supportive, they will give you back 10 times, right? But then it goes back to hiring the right person. So always, when I hire, always understand their why they want to work for us. What's driving that behavior. And if they say to me, like, they want to make a change, they want to work with the community, that's their why. So no matter what's happening, the why is always constant. The purpose is there. So it's I always say it goes back to the hiring. If you hire the right person, you may have to do a lot of work in the front end, going through the recruitment process, but it saves you a lot of work in the back end.
Amazing. Thank you, Jayne.
That's okay.
So just tell me, what's your favorite business book?
I love a lot of books, but for something that's really defined me is Robin Sharma's book, The 5 a.m. Club. So I was never a person that got up early, but I really understood about getting up early in the morning and how you set your day. And I like it. He says the way you start the day is the way you end your day. And I thought that's so beautiful. So since then, it's been like 15 years now that I get up at 4:30 every morning. So it's been amazing.
And what has, or who's been the best mentor or coach for you throughout your career?
For me, it'll be my parents. They always taught us, that we always have to look after our community. No man should be left alone. We always take care of each other. And they also instill that education, continuous learning, never give up, because that's something no one can take from you, your knowledge and your skills. And I think my mom was very much with the I am statements as well. She said, that only you can say those words to you, no one else can. And be mindful of the internal dialogue. So I think it'll be my parents that instilled the great values in me.
Love that. And what's the best piece of business advice that you've ever received?
Consistency. Be consistent in everything you do. Make it a habit. And no matter how difficult things are, how challenging it is, just be consistent.
Great. Thank you, Jayne, for sharing that leadership wisdom with us today. Great to have you on the show.
You're welcome, Michelle.
Michelle Adams, your host here. Hats off to you for committing to your learning by listening to this podcast. And if you'd like some help implementing some of these strategies, then click the link in the description to find your local action coach. They can help you put these strategies into action and take your business and your life to the next level. In the meantime, like and subscribe so that you're the first to get our next episode. We'll see you soon.